All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Urban EV podcast. We are Rob and Scott, and so glad you're here. If you're passionate about EVs, charging infrastructure, and user experience, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget, you can also catch us on your favorite streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube for a more visual experience. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest sticking points in the EV market, battery confidence. How do you really know what you're buying? And how can we make EVs as easy to shop for as traditional cars? Our guest today is Scott Case, founder and CEO of Recurrent, a company that's changing the way we understand and value used electric vehicles. If you've looked at used EV listings on cars.com lately, chances are you've already seen Recurrent in action. We'll talk to Scott about his path from product leader to EV entrepreneur, how Recurrent is helping demystify battery health, and what it means for the next generation of EV buyers and sellers. So let's get into it. Scott, welcome to the Urban EV podcast.
Hey, how's it going? This is like two bald guys and a and a dude with
Two
hair.
guys named Scott.
Yeah, I know, right? It's very confusing right now.
There's a Scott Murphy has enough hair for both of us, I think.
Tell me about it,
Yeah,
right? The guy has not lost a follicle since I met him, and I hate him
What
for
a
it.
jerk. I hate him already.
That's why I grew out the
Amazing.
mustache here. It's an overcompensation thing.
Fair. Yeah.
All right. So, Scott, we're going to be talking about Recurrent. But before we dive into that, you have a very interesting journey that took you over here as a product manager. Can you talk to us about your journey from Microsoft to where you are today?
Holy moly. All right. So, well, first of all, I've worked for Microsoft twice in my career, but never voluntarily. So first I was like casting about for employment during the what do we call it? The dot-com boom is what I was going to say. So and I needed a job for 6 months before I went into business school, and so I got a contract gig and was there for 6 months. And the second time was when they bought the company that I was working at so in the digital advertising space called Aquantive. And so I ended up I actually had an office in Redmond on campus that I never went to. And I was and I had my name on it. Apparently it was really nice. And I told them, I was like, I'm never going across the bridge after you buy this. You can buy the company, but you cannot get me to drive across the bridge. So I stayed there for my obligatory 2 years to get all the earn out and everything like that, but I was never happy about it.
Congratulations on being the very first remote worker. And of
I
course,
was,
I'm
yeah,
cheeky,
no, I
but
totally
I think you
totally
started
was.
a trend over there.
Well, the thing was, the whole second year of that, this is probably the statute of limitations has passed on this, but the whole second year of that, I was basically working on starting my first company, which was in the energy efficiency space. So I helped start a company called Energy Savvy. We work with electric utilities and natural gas utilities on their efficiency program. So if you wanted to put a new furnace heat pump in your house or insulation or air sealing or whatever, we basically our software was helping getting that done, help process rebates, help analyze the results of that, hey, I put all this stuff in, what did it do to my heating bill, that sort of thing. And so, I helped run that company for 10 years and before we were acquired in 2019, basically. And then that led me to first it led me to I'm never doing this again. I'm never starting another company again. And then 6 months later, I was like, here comes Recurrent. So
Startup junkie, Scott can relate.
Yeah. I've been there.
Is that right?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I'm sure your listeners of your podcast heard your story already, but
All right. So your new product, you're good at it. You're kind of working tangentially in the, in the electric utility space, but then you made a pivot and that went into EVs and battery health. So, give us the whole founding story of Recurrent. What problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah. So initially I was the thing I started researching after Energy Savvy was not Recurrent. It was I wanted to start a company using decommissioned EV batteries for grid storage, basically. I worked with enough electric utilities over those 10 years to realize they were going to need to integrate a lot of renewable energy into the grid. That's one thing. And that meant battery storage because, you kind of get all the solar in the middle of the day and then people use it at 5 or 6 at night. And the second thing I sort of learned about electric utilities is they're cheap. They want to do everything on the lowest cost, safe way, but they're always looking for that like low cost angle. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could outbid if I could pull this off. Like the number one sort of biggest cost component of a grid storage array is the batteries. So like if I could just take those out of leafs and old, bolts and stuff like that, then that'd be for the record, I don't recommend doing that in your home, but just take those old batteries, stick them in shipping containers in the desert and suck up the electrons from solar. My conclusion was it was too early to do that business. There were just not enough decommissioned batteries to sort of like scale it. But in the process of looking at that and like coming to that conclusion, I started to look at used electric cars because they are in a lot of ways, they are inventory in progress to becoming decommissioned batteries, right? And I was like I remember looking at old Nissan Leaf listings, and people would describe on Craigslist, people would be like, this car has 10 bars of battery. And I'm like, what does that mean? Or
What?
nine bars. It still has 9 bars. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And it was like, there was like this special little language, right? And so, yeah, it was like kind of went from there. I'm like, wait a minute. They're talking about battery health in this weird proxy that only works for that one particular car and is imperfect in all kinds of ways. So that basically was like how I hit on the idea for Recurrent, was like taking that concept, answering a question that people clearly had and clearly were asking, and had no bearing on used car sales forever, and putting that in a simple way. So that's where Recurrent came from.
Amazing. What would you say would be kind of your first big hurdle in launching Recurrent? Like, obviously, again, coming from a product background, you tell me what you think the biggest hurdle was.
So the biggest hurdle was I started working on that company basically in the end of 2019 and got to the point where I was sort of ready. I was like, I think I have a deck or whatever. March 17th, 2020. I live in
Okay.
Seattle. And so that was the week I had one meeting at like this incubator in Seattle. And during the meeting, an email went out to everyone. It was like, everyone needs to go home right now because COVID, And like, I literally it was like during that meeting, we had just decided it was like, what's that game? The musical chairs. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
music was about to stop, and I'm like, I'm gonna grab this chair right now,
yeah.
and so I basically like kind of like struck the deal right there of like, hey, let's go for this, and then ended up like working with, it's called Pioneer Square Labs, just a great software incubator in Seattle. Ended up working with them to get the company going and actually have that happen. And literally, I feel like if I had had the meeting scheduled the following day, it wouldn't have happened, and the company might never have happened, because then we all went into lockdown, So that was a hurdle.
Oof, that was a hurdle. That's a big one.
So let's now dive into Recurrent. Luckily enough, by the skin of your teeth here, you got it off the ground. Can you explain Recurrent's value to someone who's just EV curious, who's like, I don't know about this EV thing. What is it about the batteries? What is it that you do that kind of helps people kind of get over the hump?
Yeah. And as I talk through this too, I'm curious about what you guys personally have, like, do you guys drive EVs? I'm assuming, right?
Scott he's all about EV. He's e-mobility. He does
Can we
bike
wait?
things.
This is confusing. Every time you say Scott, I think you're
Oh
talking
my
about
God.
me. Can we just say Murphy? Can you say Murphy? Is that okay
Yeah.
for this
You're
call?
gonna have to. I know Scott Murphy. You're gonna have to start a
You
nickname
can call
for
me
you.
Case, but like I'm just it's just killing me. I keep on forgetting his name is
We've
Scott.
never had this problem before, Scott Case.
How about this? Bald Scott, hair Scott.
Yeah,
Oh my
right.
God, he's right about that.
No, I hate cars, but I know a lot about EVs. I spend a little bit of time at Revel in Brooklyn, so got to experience a
yeah.
lot of electric cars. But I hate cars. I'm anti-car. No, I'm
irony of
only
all
joking.
ironies.
I'm only joking. I'm anti-private car ownership, is what I say. I have a electric mobility startup based in Spain that does e-bikes with battery swapping.
Okay. Cool.
But Scott Case, so I love the way you're turning the tables here, and this goes to show everyone. We're going to get into this, by the way. Scott hosts a social media channel and does it actively and does an amazing job. It's kind of how I discovered him. So this is fantastic. You're turning the tables here, Scott, because I was trying to figure out a way to work this into the conversation, but you just opened the door. Yes, Scott Case, I have a lot of experience working with your brand, with Recurrent, because I literally, over the past month, have been in the used EV marketplace looking for a used EV.
Okay.
And so just so you know, and this had nothing to do with your interview or setting this up or our connection right
Yeah.
now. So I've been driving a Kia EV9, which just got lemons. It's for a whole nother podcast, a whole nother story, but it's going
And we,
back to
we
the
do need to do
manufacturer.
that, by the way, because like you've been talking about this for a month now, and I still
Yeah,
have not
right.
heard the story.
That's really, yeah. I have like two of my neighbors in Tacoma both have the EV9. Is
They're
that
great
like it?
cars.
So it was just yours had an issue with
Well,
it?
it's I wouldn't say it's a common problem, but in the EV9 community, it's a known problem. It's front end vibration, and it doesn't seem like Kia has an answer for it. They certainly didn't have an answer for me. So this is a very long and drawn
All right,
out
sidebar,
affair over here.
sidebar. Yeah, that's really
Yeah, and
interesting. I
eventually
hadn't
Better
heard
Business
that.
Bureau got involved, and after several hearings and whatnot, they finally agreed to do the full manufacturer's buyback, which is wonderful, which basically means I drove a car for free for a year. And it's a wonderful car. I wish it didn't have that problem. I'd still be driving it. It's big, it's fast, it's slick, it looks super cool. The range is sufficient. So it really checked a lot of boxes. So me and my wife, we wanted a third row SUV, but we're not sure. We were willing to make some compromises. We were looking at the used EV market. And what I realized was battery health. This is a big issue. My wife, I'm obviously the EV enthusiast over here, and that's why we're talking. And my wife is the standard layperson. She's like, I'm not buying a used EV. Who knows what's going on with that battery? Right?
That's the
This is
thing right there. That's exactly why we started the company right there.
is this music to
And
your ears?
well, it's just, I mean, it's a confirmation of what the questions that the used EV shopper asks, right? They ask it in all kinds of different ways. That one that your wife said is one of them. You can also say, like, how far does it go? Does it go less distance if you live in a northern climate? Like, oh, I've heard these don't go very far in the winter, or the battery doesn't work in the winter. There's all kinds of questions, right? And if you think about it, like, that was never a question that you asked shopping for a used car back in the day, right? It's like you go there, you smell it inside, you look at the odometer, and maybe you take it to a mechanic and they look at the oil to see if it's cloudy. None of those things are what people are asking now for a used EV. And we just realized, like, hey, if you sort of zoom out, the implication to that, where you have this like market that sort of isn't working very well, the result is higher depreciation and lower residuals on new EVs, which means that manufacturers aren't incented to make them, and it becomes difficult for leasing companies and fleet companies like Scott Murphy, like Revel, to make the kind of the thing work that accelerates the overall transition. And so we just were like, yeah, we were just like, this piece, the used market has to be high functioning and work in order for the overall EV transition to work. And that's where we decided to jump in on that piece.
And once again, circling back to my test case over here. So I feel, as I was looking, there's two things. You're right about that. When you're looking for a used car, it's the odometer. There's a few basic things you need to know. Carfax has become sort of like the de facto role of, when I'm looking at a used car, you immediately look at the Carfax. It's on the listing here. I know one owner, blah, blah, blah. Here's the list of problems or no problems or accidents. All right, it checks out. It's good enough for me to take my time to go down to the dealership and take a look at it. I feel like Recurrent now is become synonymous with the Carfaxes. You wouldn't dream of going down to the dealership and taking a look at the car before you looked at the report on the battery as well. It's synonymous in my book. And what's interesting, Scott, and here I'm basically, I think I'm kind of going to say what you're probably going to tell me anyway, but what I loved about this, what I loved about the Recurrent report is, here's your battery state of health, and it gives you a 0 through 100 rating. And all right, this one's 96. This car is, 2 years old. You got a 96. Here's what you can anticipate the battery performance to be over the next 3 years. And I love that as well. Where are we and where are we going with this thing? It gives the consumer a tremendous amount of confidence to basically move forward with that purchase. So,
Yeah.
talk to me more about it, because that's my
Yeah.
perspective over here. I
Yeah,
found
no, that's right.
cars.com, by the way. We could talk about that as well. That's where I
Oh, that's
noticed
where
it.
you were shopping, is on cars.com. Yeah, they're a
And
great partner of ours. Yeah. Yeah.
and Auto Trader does not, apparently not a partner of yours.
That's
So
correct.
I was on both websites, searching for cars. And what I would do is, even if I saw something I liked on Auto Trader, then I'd basically cross-reference it on cars.com because I want to see that report.
Hey, listen, Auto Trader, you're welcome to give us a call. It's great. I'm gonna clip this and I'm gonna send it to them. Anyway, yeah. Sorry, I got distracted with that one. So, well, actually, before I want to finish the story. So
Please
you
do.
wanted a 3-row SUV. So did you end up with a Model X, or did you end
Okay,
up with a
so
Rivian, or like what did you end up getting?
in the end, we actually ended up leasing a new one. I was really high on the BMW iX. Actually, I really
Okay.
love it. Doesn't have a third row, but it's pretty
Yeah.
big.
Okay.
But luckily enough for me anyway, with Elon running his mouth over the last 6 to 12 months,
That's tough. Yeah.
the deals they're offering right now, plus the $7,500 incentive going away, the lease deals were insane on a Model Y. So I got the Juniper Model Y. Yeah, I'm actually
Okay,
picking
so
up
you got a
next
Model
week.
Y leased 3-row, like the seven
It's
seater
two
one.
row. They don't
You
offer the
okay?
3 row
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. They
Yeah,
don't. I didn't realize that.
yeah,
Okay,
they took it
gotcha.
away.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
they got some. If we go really want to geek out here, there's a third row version that's a little extended, and I think it's a little taller that they're releasing in China. And then who knows if they're going to replicate that here in the U.S. But apparently it's like the YL, I think they're calling it.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of room in
No,
that third row.
no, I'm some 6'4". My kids are all tall. It's
Yeah.
that baby third row wasn't going to
Yeah,
work.
that's true. So, I mean, so I think what's interesting is that for both new and used EVs, like, yeah, people think like the battery is going to nothing, right? And so the perception is basically like way worse than what we figured out the reality to. And so, like, in our products, like, we have both on the new side, because we cover new and used, right? All the questions about buying EVs are the same for new, except for how's the battery already. But the version of it is like, how's the battery going to age, right? And so we thought we've got this thing of like, hey, where is it now, and where will it be in 3 years? And so then, well, how do we do that, right? That's like, it's
Yeah.
actually really like difficult what we're doing. And, we're not just like reading EPA range off of manufacturer website. We have at this point 30 plus thousand cars that are connected on our free owner platform. Once you buy the car, and hopefully, Rob, you did this, it's like you can buy the car and then you can register it with us. And so then you get every month you get a report that shows like how your car is aging and how it's doing compared to all the other Model Ys of the same make model year. What we do then is like we take that data in aggregate to basically like use to inform, like, when we're doing a range in 3-year projection for a used car or new car, we're basically like using all of the aggregate data from the people that are on the platform, with their owner insights, to essentially predict what's going to happen in the future, dependent on different weather conditions and dependent on charging patterns and all that sort of thing. And of course, when it's a car you're buying for, as a new car or used car, you don't own it already. We're having to use the average of what we've seen and what we've observed over time. You can abuse the heck out of the car or you can treat it beautifully. And so, you may get a different outcome over 3 or 5 years, but yeah, we're at least informing that on what we've seen and actually observed. And it's like crazy now. We've observed almost 1 billion miles of driving and charging off of like upwards of 50,000 vehicles across
Wow.
almost 100 different makes and models of EV and plug-in hybrids. This is like the data set that we have that's informing this is like truly staggering and like frankly unique. Not even the manufacturers have this information. They all have lots of information on their own cars, but no one is sitting there being able to cross compare like how do all EVs do over 5 years in Phoenix, and what
Mm.
differences are there from manufacturer to manufacturer. So it's actually a pretty unique position to be in.
So just out of curiosity, getting to the nitty gritty over here, nuts
Yeah.
and bolts. How does that work? You collect the data through Wi-Fi or through an actual hardware component that's installed in the car? How does that work?
Yeah, no hardware component. So every manufacturer has like a connected services account. So it's your Tesla login, or it's your OnStar for Chevy, or it's your Nissan Connect. And so all those connected services accounts, generally, they don't all work this way, but you can give permission for a third party to get access to a slice of that data, basically. And so that's how it works for us. So you would log in, with your Tesla account, like you log into, well, actually you create an account with Recurrent, you authorize Recurrent to pull data from your car, and then it's like we say, hey, we're getting it's actually, the authorization is actually very, very sort of orderly and clean. It didn't used to be when we started, but it's like, hey, you're giving Recurrent permission to pull, state of charge, range estimate, odometer, and charging event information, and that's it, right? We don't know where your car is, we don't know how you're driving it, all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty like clean permission sort of like set. And then we actually never even see your Tesla credentials. We just get a authorization token that allows us to pull data unless you revoke it. And so it's I think it's a nice setup there. Different manufacturers work differently, but that's sort of the general pattern of it. And then we get the stream of data on your car, and then we can present back, like we give you a monthly report that's like a wellness check for your car. That's the other thing, is like nobody takes their car into the mechanic to get the oil changed anymore. So like there's this sort of like, I think people are wondering like, hey, is my car okay? Is this normal? It's cold out, my car's losing range. Is that going to come back in the spring, or is there a problem? And so this is a way that it kind of scratches that itch of saying, hey, you're okay, or in very, very rare instances, something's wrong. Like you need to, and we've actually seen that where we've flagged a battery issue in someone who signed up before any indicator lights came on, or anything like that. And we're like, the person sort of wrote in, they were like, hey, this is a little weird. And we're like, yeah, that's a little weird. You should take it to the Audi dealership. Your e-tron looks like no other cars that we've seen. And sure enough, it was a defective battery component.
And is that the motivating factor for now? You've got several different verticals where your business works.
Yeah.
What's the motivating factor? Clearly, Scott, at the end of this podcast here, I'm going to sign I'm receiving the Tesla Model Y next week. I'm going to first.
But you haven't gotten it yet. You haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah,
this is all
this
very,
is
very recent stuff.
Tuesday.
Oh my gosh.
Next week.
Wow. Okay, gotcha. So I can't make fun of you for not signing up already.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I'm running straight to my computer and registering, but talk to us about the motivation for everyone else that doesn't have to be on this podcast right now. What's motivating people to come over to Recurrent? Now, I already saw the value clear while I was shopping for the used car, but talk to me about the value proposition for someone that already owns one and what motivates them to come to you.
Yeah, so it's kind of two pieces. One is that you sign up, it's free. First of all, as an owner, it's free, right? And so you sign up and you get this monthly report that's just like, hey, how are you driving? How are you charging? How is your battery doing compared to all the others that are comparable out there? So there's a nice like, a lot of EV drivers are nerds, and you guys, I'm sure, being some of them,
yeah.
And so there's a nice little like, kind of like way of doing that, but you don't have to pay for anything, right? I think people like that. There's that kind of wellness check for your car. What we sort of figured out over time, and now we're 5 years into the company, right? The other thing we figured out over time, I'll tell you how this happened. Every once in a while, we lose connectivity to a car, right? And they get an automatic email that's just like, "Hey, is your car in the shop, or is it parked deep in a parking garage?" And literally, like it would just be like for a couple of weeks we couldn't access, like we lost contact to the car. And so they would get this automatic email, right? Hey, you need to reconnect. And we would get emails back that would say, the person would be like, "Oh yeah, like I sold that car, and I bought this other new car. I'm going to sign the new car up now." But then someone would be like, "I printed out my Recurrent report and showed it to the buyer because they had questions about battery." And we were like, "Oh, that's cool." Like I didn't think about that.
Noted.
Noted. Yeah. So we launched, this was probably 2 years ago. We launched this thing called Sell with Recurrent, where basically you can, when you're ready to sell your car, your EV, 95% of the time you're upgrading to another one, right? Then you can work with us to like basically have your battery information taken into account when you go and sell it to we don't do private party stuff. Like you can still print out your report and share it with somebody, and people do that. But we basically make it really easy to sell to an EV specialist dealer and get a great offer based on, in part, your battery information. And that's actually taken off really strongly, especially this year, where people are getting incredible offers and selling. It's super easy, super trustworthy. And the nice thing is, like, you're only selling to EV specialist dealerships that actually know what they're talking about. And we're sort of aggregating together it's like 500 different dealerships and basically presenting you with like, here's the best offer. And so it ends up being, a lot of people will go online. They shop it on CarMax, they shop it on Carvana, they shop it on, and if it's an EV, they'll put it into Recurrent. And sometimes they have a higher price, sometimes we do. I think like often what's happening is like the cars with better batteries, like they get valued more highly by us, and the ones with maybe not as good batteries get, if your battery is trashed, I think that's where you probably want to take it down and sell it to a schlub who's not paying attention, kind of thing. So
No,
anyway,
it's fine. It's fine.
it's
Not
a
saying
cool
the
value
unspoken
prop.
part out loud.
Yeah, I know. It's a cool value prop that I honestly we didn't see going into the company. We didn't sort of think about this, but it's sort of turning into this pretty neat business, and it serves the EV owner really well, So that's why that felt like a good expansion to go into.
I mean, it seems like it serves the EV owner and the specialist dealerships, right? Because they're getting a ton of background data on the car before they even make an offer and sell it. No?
It is turning into a great acquisition channel for EV specialist dealerships, to, you know, have like, yeah, they know what they're getting, right? From a battery perspective, it reduces the risk there. And then the other thing is like, there's some selection bias here. Like the people that sign up for Recurrent are basically nerds that are taking care of their car in a lot of other ways. And so
Well,
I
fair
think
enough.
that EV dealerships are like, yeah, they're like, you know what? We know basically that we're going to get the car's going to be in pretty sweet shape, because if they went through the trouble of signing up for Recurrent and tracking their data for 3 years, like we can assume a lot about the rest of the way they took care of the car. So it's a great, I think it's just a win-win for dealerships and for sellers of cars.
Right. So let's do a little pivot right now. I'd like to talk about the broader market itself, the trends, the myths, the market gaps, and what have you.
Oh, it's totally boring. Nothing going on in the EV market right
We
now
like
at
go a little
all.
deeper sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you talk to us more about what you've observed this change in the past few years, with used EVs in particular?
I mean, okay, so the big story of, let's go rewind a couple of years ago was the introduction of the $4,000 tax credit on used EVs, right? And for the first year, that was like on the year, and during 2023, it was a tax credit you had to claim on your income taxes, and so you had to jump through all the hoops and everything like that and owe enough taxes, and it would just be a much later thing. But then January 2024, that snapped into a point of sale rebate, and that became this like really industry defining sort of like a market feature. But like it's a really like the way it ended up happening was, I think, like it's like the rule was like, hey, the car's got to be priced less than $25,000 in order to qualify for this $4,000 credit, right, or point of sale rebate. So what ended up happening is like $25,000, or more specifically $24,999, ended up being the most popular price for a used EV. Like that exact price was like a black hole pulling in anything that would have been priced at 26 or 27 was getting pulled down to 24.9, and also some stuff that was probably should have was maybe before priced at 22 or 23 was getting pulled up to 24.9, because then you would get a $4,000 credit on it, and so you're only paying 21. So that it just like used EV pricing got very like flattened, I think, in a way. The like 25 was a ceiling, but also a little bit of a floor over that period of time. And then this year, the story is like all of a sudden like faster than I think anybody than I certainly expected. Although actually I am on record of having said as of November of last year, I was like, yeah, all the EV credits, it'll be somewhere between September 30th and December 31st. Like that's when they're all out the door, right? And sure enough, like I did think it was going to make it. I thought it was going to make it till December 31st, but like ultimately it sort of like got pulled up to September 30th. So that is already causing like just wild gyrations in the used market right now. There's the impending end of that. And there's two things going on. One is like there's just like dealers are like, I'm just going to sell as much as I possibly can right up till of those tax cars, they'll call them tax cars, right up to September 30th. And so like just, I mean, the high, very high volume, but there's like on the wholesale side of where those dealers are getting their inventory, like there's like older cars with higher mileage are getting sort of bid up right up to that sort of 21, 22 level because they'll put them on the market at 24.9. And so it's a little bit like, I think you don't want to automatically buy just to make sure you get that credit, but there's a lot of volume, and I think like from a shopper psychology perspective, everybody's motivated by a deadline, and so like that September 30th really does feel like that is the time to buy a used EV between now and then. I think the more interesting question though is what happens after that, the day after, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is still going to be an EV market, and in fact, like the story of like, so there's like, so here's what I think is going to happen is like tons of volume on used and new sales right up to September 30th. Like everybody's leasing an EV right now as well. Like that's the other thing. I mean, Rob, you said didn't you lease the Y?
The Y is a lease, yeah. Also, the point of sale instant rebate is another huge factor. Yeah.
Right. And that's on every new leased car. And so like dealers are leasing the new ones like they're going out of style. I mean, right now, just to because everything there's actually only a few that qualify for a 7,500 new credit now because it's like they've really tightened the restrictions down. But anything leased, between now and September 30th gets that credit. But you know what? All that leasing activity, that surge started right on the nose on January 1st, 2023. Now, fast forward, most leases are 3 years. Fast forward 3 years later, what's about to happen on January 1st, 2026 is an absolute a tidal wave of lease returns. Just because of the sort of like the 3-year echo of what happened 3 years ago. That means basically like next year, and just to put these in numbers, like the lease return numbers are tripling from 2025 to 2026 on the EV side.
Yikes.
So now
that's a good thing for some people. Yeah.
It's a good thing for some people. But it's also really interesting in the broader context of the auto industry. 2022 and 2023 were some of the lowest production years for new cars overall because of supply chain hiccups in the aftermath of COVID. And so you have this weird situation where next year the lease returns for traditional cars are way down. There're just not very many of them coming back. But lease returns for EVs are triple what they are this year, right? Because that became like, if there was going to be a new EV like that was sold, it was almost definitely going to be leased, right? In 2023. So next year is basically the year of buying a 3-year-old, used EV because the supply is going through the roof. I mean, so it's really interesting, like, a market's like supply and demand. So on the one hand, you're losing the $4,000 credit, right, as of September 30th. But on the other hand, there's this surge of supply that's coming into the market. What that does to prices, I don't know. I have lots of speculation about it, but I think like, I think that my best guess is there's going to be this sort of bimodal market where some cars are being held down by the like, hey, you got to sell it for 24.9 are going to sort of like are going to float up into the mid to the high 20s, and other cars that were being pulled up because of that rebate are actually going to drop down because there's more supply. So that's what I've got. I'm probably totally wrong, but
no. Listen, it's interesting now how the market forces are going to basically attack this thing here, and who knows which direction they're going in. I would imagine supply demand. We're going to get a lot of supply dropping in there, and should be a buyer's market. It makes sense even with the loss of the credit. But I wanted you to take one quick, a little bit of a step backwards right now, and I'm sure you're very well aware. Tax credits, no tax credits. EV depreciation famously is huge. It way outpaces ICE vehicles. Do you have any idea of why that's the case? Is it maybe because people have been lacking these battery reports and they're just unsure of what you're going to get?
I'm going to give you 3 answers. There's like 1, 2, and 3, right? Answers in this. 1, I think you're right that there's uncertainty, when your wife was like, I don't want one of those used EVs because I don't know where the battery's been, right? Like, if you zoom out to just, not everybody says that, but enough people I think do, and they're uncomfortable with it, that like there's uncertainty there, and therefore there's like less demand, and so therefore there's like the market equilibrium price drops, right? I think that's real, and that's what we're trying to work with. The second answer is like that EV tax credit. There was an original one back in the day that was like during Obama that was in place. It was up to 200,000 units, and then it was sort of out for a little bit, and then the Inflation Reduction Act put the $7,500 back. That huge sort of like $7,500 thing caused, I think, causes the depreciation to look greater than it is. And the reason is like, hey, if you're like, well, gosh, like I can pick up a new Model Y or whatever for 45,000, and then I can put depending on the trim, then I can put the $7,500 on top of that, so my effective out of pocket's 37,000 or whatever. And that's what you look at, is if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll buy new, maybe I'll buy used. If the new equivalent price is $7,500 lower, the used equivalent price has to be lower as well, right? And so I think a lot of the time people are not taking into account the impact of that tax credit on depreciation, or weren't. And so with that going away, there's really more of, for the first time, there is a opportunity for us to see what the real depreciation, like completely aside from tax credits, is. So that's where I think that's like the number two. And the number three, and I think this happens so often in the EV market, is that Tesla has been, for the first decade of this market, the overwhelming volume of sales, right? And so basically when you look at the EV sector, what you are seeing is what happens with Teslas. And then all the rest of the manufacturers have been a rounding error on that. And so I think that you do have a situation where Teslas in particular, like, I mean, sometimes they're like, it's been a roller coaster, right? But when you have a situation where people are saying, you know what, like, the technology is moving really fast, I want to get the latest and greatest, and then they look at and Tesla pricing has been a little bit all over the place, like much less stable than traditional automakers have been. You have this situation where like the Tesla depreciation becomes synonymous with EV depreciation, right? And so and now with Tesla having a lower share of the market, I think like you have an opportunity to see, well, actually, what does this look like in other, with the Volkswagen ID.4, or with with the other things. And this is all connected market, but I just think that we're going to move past the Wild West sort of period of the first decade of EVs and see really what continues there. And I don't think there's any good reason why you can today, like, it just feels like this crazy screaming deal to be able to pick up a 4 or 5-year-old Chevy Bolt for 10 grand. And you know what kind of trash dump of a used ICE car you can get for 10 grand? You can get like nothing. It's just
Nothing.
falling
Yeah.
apart. The bumper's like duct taped on, for 10 grand. And, versus a low mileage, like 2020 Chevy Bolt that's like, that you're never going to have to put a dime into, just doesn't make any sense, So I think we're going to really like see that market mature as we move forward. And I don't think EV depreciation is going to be really part of the story as we move forward.
And it's like I usually don't ask questions so I can answer them myself. But while you were talking, you made me realize.
Now you're about to
made
give me the right
realize
answer to your
something.
question. Okay, gotcha.
You made me realize something, as I've been on the market for the last month. So I got to see a lot as well up close. And part of it is, I think what's also driving the numbers down is a lot of these EVs, they're priced like luxury vehicles. They are luxury vehicles, right? They're 50, 60, 80, 120 grand, right? So luxury vehicles historically also typically get a really big hit in depreciation. And the luxury EVs in particular, like one of the, I told you I was looking at the iX, which I really liked a lot, by the way. I think it's a fantastic car. While we didn't pull the trigger on it, I still like, that was kind of like my goal. It was, even with the depreciation, was a little out of my comfort zone for the price I was looking to do. But a car that did fall into my range was the Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV, which also can come in a third row. And so there's a couple of things here, which I realize is these are also early first gen, maybe not first necessarily, first, second gen automobiles. They didn't have everything dialed in. The EQS is a car that's like universally panned for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of these also these some of these Mercedes and even the Porsches have really low range, which I think in the end, when you're getting a luxury vehicle and the car can only give you 230 miles of range, like that's not going to cut it. It's not a real world useful car. Sure, going around town, but I think that also really kind of kneecaps it as well, and probably further hurts the depreciation of some of these vehicles that you're hearing so much about.
I think that's right. Every manufacturer, when you make your first EV off the line, it costs you a lot of money because you're amortizing all the fixed costs of all the sort of setting up the whole, battery assembly plant, everything like that. And so they almost everyone, Tesla included, you know, basically introduce the EVs at the very, very high end, right? And high end cars always have more depreciation. So I think that's a really good point. My friends, by the way, like I get texts, regularly, like what car should I buy, right? Like what EV should I buy? And there's always like, I have to answer this at parties all the time. This is basically like comes with the job, and there's a lot like, okay, what's your lifestyle? What do you want to do and everything like that. But the one thing I've like, doesn't matter what they say, is I'm like, you probably don't want to buy the first EV that a manufacturer, makes, or that's their one to kind of get the wiggles out.
In my ear before I got the EV9.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, that wasn't their first one, but
it wasn't the first. But it was the first year EV9 was manufactured.
Yeah,
and, it had some.
But like for Volkswagen, for instance, like my first EV that I bought was an ID4. Great car, absolutely loved it. I wouldn't have touched an e-Golf with a 10-foot pole, kind of thing. I think the e-Golf was the one where they kind of it was their practice swings, and then the ID4 was great. And now I own an ID Buzz, and man, that's a fun car to drive. Wow, it's so cool.
That car is so intriguing. Third row, that's what I was looking for. Yeah. The range thing was what killed me. Also, it's a low range car. And slow charger. So, that's another issue I had with it.
Here's the thing. All right, I'm gonna pick a fight with you on this. On the Buzz here. First of all, let me just say the driving experience of Buzz. You have to be an extrovert and you have to want to talk about EVs, because when you pull into a parking lot, you draw a crowd everywhere.
I love that.
Right?
We're in alignment here.
Yeah. And by the way, I figured that was going to happen, right? The EV nerds were going to want to come up. What I was not anticipating is the aging hippies also come up to you, and they want to tell stories about when they had one of the original, Volkswagen buses, and when they drove across the country to see a Dead show in San Francisco and met these hippie chicks, and so they just want to tell stories, and so you have to really, want to like embrace that, and like, and I like old hippies, so it works for me. But here's the thing is like the range on the EPA range on the Buzz, and we've seen this in our data because we have not just my car connected, but a bunch of them. Volkswagen's really conservative with it. And so the EPA range is like, we're regularly getting better than the EPA when we drive it normally. And I will say, freeway driving with that big 6,000-pound van with like not the best aerodynamics, yeah, like you will end up getting sort of like that, sort of a lower range. But when I say a lower range, I'm talking like 200 miles, kind of thing. Like, but when you're just driving around town, it's fine. Like it's blowing the EPA away. So I think it's a little bit of got a bad rap just on the numbers, right? But the second thing is like Volkswagen gets access to the Tesla supercharging network like next month, I think. And once that happens, like I had no fear, no range anxiety in that car. I mean, I've owned it since December. I've never had to charge it publicly once because I'm like plugging it in at home all the time. So like, would I take it on a road trip today? No, I don't. I take our Model Y, which is the other, our other EV. Once Volkswagen gets access to the superchargers, like, will I ever road trip in my Y again? Nope. I'm good in the Buzz,
That's awesome. And that's exactly it. It's for me, living in the city, I only have one car, so I don't have access to two, that I can have one for different flavors for different missions. And that was my biggest issue, is actually I've got a kid that plays travel soccer, so we're on the road a lot. So the road tripping ability on the highway, that's what matters. And it's a rolling brick. I get it, and that's where you're going to get hit the hardest. I love it otherwise, and I'm rooting for Volkswagen. I'm rooting for the Buzz. It's the coolest looking car out there by far.
Oh my God, yeah.
So
it's cool.
Scott, just to speak a little bit kind of the broader industry impact, Where do you see this category of like battery reporting in the next 3 to 5 years? Obviously, a lot is changing.
I think that the expectation for a used EV anyway is like, just like you wouldn't sell a car without showing a Carfax, I think you would not sell a car without providing a recurrent report. I'm just going to say it's like synonymous, right? I mean, we're working with dealerships all over the country nationally. We're working CarMax, we're working on the wholesale side. Cars.com, Edmunds, it just really is like kind of the default, at this point. And I think that's the expectation moving forward. And if you're not providing that as a dealer, there's like you're hiding something.
Interesting. How do you see Recurrent evolving as the EV landscape itself matures?
I mean, there's just what we do. While it sounds kind of simple, it's just like, oh, it's just a Carfax report for EVs. Like there's a lot behind that data. And so as there are, more different makes and models with different battery packs and different battery chemistries, like the complexity of like trying to figure out what's going on in every single one of these cars gets higher and higher. And so I think that just means there's more value in like, yeah, somebody's got to tackle that, and put it in a simple way and keep it apples to apples across the board. And so I think that's the path we've chosen.
So Scott,
Amazing.
you've kind of, I feel, especially on LinkedIn, you've become this thought leader, particularly with your videos here. You have a really nice, strong following. By the way, everyone listening, I strongly recommend finding Scott online and following him.
You got to hang on. You got to make sure you get the right Scott Case. So there is
Scott
this other
Case.
guy.
Scott Murphy's a good guy to follow also.
No.
Other
There's
Scott
two
Cases?
Scott Cases. There are two Scott Cases. So the founding CTO of Priceline, his name
Is Scott Case?
Scott Case. Well, his hang on. I think his middle name is Scott. I think it's like he's got a first initial, but he goes by Scott Case. So he's kind of my nemesis on LinkedIn because he's like he's got more followers or whatever. So follow me, my Scott Case. Let that other Scott Case, let him go by. He doesn't post anything interesting. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
So typically I ask that when we wrap up, but what's the best way for everyone to find you online for all those listening?
Well, I mean, our website's recurrentauto.com, and so, or you just Google Recurrent, and we finally beat the dictionary definition of recurrent, which is like, I don't know why that took so long, but yeah, that's the way to go. And then if you're an EV owner, that's the place to come to sign up your car. If you're ready to sell your EV, that's the place where you can do that. Again, like with all the battery data and sort of selling it to a specialist dealer. And then if you're shopping, like we don't do anything for shoppers on our site because it's our data and our reports that are getting used across the, dealerships and marketplaces all around the country. And so I would, head to cars.com, head to Edmunds, like start your search there, find a dealership that's working with Recurrent. And you're seeing our analytics in there on their listings. And so that's kind of where you would find us there. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, just find me and not the other Scott Case, not the Priceline Scott Case.
Now, go accept my pending LinkedIn request. Correct, Scott Case.
I'll do that, right? I'll get right on that right after this call.
Top priority, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Well, listen, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show. This was a super fun conversation, and I hope we can kind of keep in touch and do it again sometime. I'd love to have a follow up with you in another year or so. So tell us how things are going.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks.
That's going to do it for this episode of the Urban EV Podcast. A big thank you to Scott Case for joining us and for helping make the used EV market more transparent, more trustworthy, and frankly, a lot more exciting. If you're curious about your own EV's battery health or thinking about buying used, definitely check out recurrentauto.com and follow Scott on LinkedIn for his weekly updates. They're quick, sharp, and just full of useful insights. As always, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Make sure to follow and share if you're into the future of electric mobility. The road to sustainability starts at the plug, and that's why we're here. We will see you all next week with a new episode of the Urban EV Podcast.